Why aren't motorcyclists as toxic as car guys? Despite both lacking metal machines powered by liquid explosive dinosaur on wheels, one of the biggest differences I've noticed between car guys and motorcyclists is how vastly differently they behave to one another. So here's why bikers are just generally not as toxic. The first one is my favorite reason, is that we weed out the bad actors kind of unintentionally because we have a built-in anti-clout barrier. What I love the most about bike culture is the fact that it has these built-in clout defenses, and especially since internet culture has massively changed how people behave around purchasing or consuming certain products and joining certain communities and getting involved with certain cultures, it's nice to kind of have this built-in defense. This doesn't mean that clout chasers don't exist in the bike community, it just means they don't exist for very long. The reasoning for this is motorcycles are harder to ride, there's a lot less status involved in them, and they're just generally not as flashy looking. Even the most expensive custom NV Agusta or Ducati is still hard to tell from like a couple hundred feet away. Even things like H2s or Ducatis or NV Agustas or CVO Harleys, they just don't have the showstopper look that a Ferrari, Lamborghini, Rolls Royce, or a McLaren will, or so on and so forth. And I don't mean that as an insult, by the way. An NV Agusta, Ducatis, or other high-end motorcycles are still without a doubt absolute pieces of art. They're very beautiful. However, let's be real here. For non-car people and especially for non-bike people, if they were to look at either a Ducati or a Ferrari, 90% of them are going to say that the Ferrari is more eye-catching, probably 98% of them actually, and that mostly has to do with its size, and as well as its movie recognition, video game recognition. It's easier to tell cars apart because motorcycles are smaller, so having said that, that means the ability to appreciate beautiful motorcycles is an acquired taste, so unless you're really into riding or really into motorcycles, you're not going to be able to spot them from far away, and because of what I just said, this immediately makes them very unappealing for 50% of clout boys who only buy things for status and recognition. This is part of the reason why almost everyone who owns a Ducati is still a pretty dang good rider, whereas everyone who drives a Ferrari usually can still be a pretty bad driver because they might just be a rich person who just got the money to buy the car. The other 50% of clout chasers are after speed and thrills, and bike culture also has a self-solving solution for this issue. It's a rather permanent one. Probably going to change my tone for this section because it's one of the saddest things I have to witness car guys who transition to bike culture. Whether it's on forums, whether it's in group chats, discords, communities, and whatnot, you see car guys who talk like this. I drive a 1,000 wheel horsepower twin turbo modded Mustang. I'm used to speed. I'm addicted to it. I can totally handle a BMW S1000RR as my first bike, bro. Don't tell me otherwise. It's a free country, man. It's America. I can buy what I want, man. And then they go ahead and buy it. They buy a super capable leader bike because to them it's relatively cheap. It's basically cheaper than a lot of sports cars these days still, and that's their first bike ever. And then they become a bloodstain on the side of the road. I'm gonna make a whole video regarding this topic because it's kind of deep, and all I have to say is ego is a huge issue with car culture, and we'll get into later this video about how ego is something that bikers thankfully seem to lack, or if you want to live a long time, you're gonna lack. Basically, you can make so many stupid, dumb, idiot mistakes, and the car will insulate you from your own stupidity. This is why a lot of clout chasers live to crash 7 different Hellcats and get all of them repoed still. On a bike though, one big mistake is all you're allowed to make. You'll be lucky if you live that, but for most people, they're gone after they do. The second reason motorcyclists aren't as toxic as car guys is just brotherhood. No matter what happens, other bikers are there for you. Whether you go down or someone else goes down, we all stop together. If you're learning to ride, you're not gonna crash at those insane speeds. Your first crash might even be at no speed. It might just be you fell over in a parking lot. If you're not going stupid, insane speeds like triple digits on local roads, like not even on an empty highway, you should be fine. And if inevitably, the reason I'm mentioning this is because every motorcyclist, the reason we kind of have this brotherhood is because at some point we've either gone down, like we've already crashed, or we know we're going to go down. So even if you're someone who hasn't crashed yet, you may crash in the future. So this kind of has an unspoken rule where we just have more empathy for each other. Because we've either been down on the ground or we know we may go down on the ground in the future, the realization keeps us grounded and humble. We always look out for each other. For example, earlier this year I was teaching one of my friends in a parking lot on my Iron 883. He unfortunately ended up crashing the bike. Thankfully, I had frame sliders on the bike, so the bike didn't actually get that badly badly damaged. It was like $10 worth of paint. But some random guy passing by on a naked bike just popped a U-turn to check on us because he was passing by on the roads, heard the crash happen, immediately just did a U-turn, came back, asked if we were okay. We're like, yeah, we're good, man. A lot of people who are coming from cars into bikes, one of the things you're scared of is like, if I crash, will bikers laugh at me? I'm like, no, we won't. We'll group chats or communities or forums, if you post like, hey, I crashed, people, the first question almost every biker asks is, yo, you okay? Do you need any help? Like, where are you at? People even will come out to, you know, help you if they have to. Like, I've seen people even get their truck out to help tow someone off the road if they needed to, while that person got sent to the hospital instead. But they got the bike off the road in the meantime, instead of having that person pay for their own tow. So like, this community is like linked. And I will admit, cars did have more camaraderie pre-Clout era. Never to the level that bikers did, but it was kind of like a brotherhood, like a lower level brotherhood, but still pretty cool. Like, bikers, meanwhile, are still just as close as ever. We still all wave at each other, we all check up on each other, and we all help each other. And most importantly, we don't shame each other when something bad happens. I already know someone will comment oh, well, that just sounds so extra and exhausting. I don't want to have to feel responsible for everyone else that I see on a bike. They're just strangers. And in reality, it's not that hard. Obviously, I don't expect you to be best friends with every other biker that you see on the road. You're not going to know them by name. But the point is, like I said, it's like a brotherhood. You're welcome to buy a bike and join us, by the way. But like I said, just have some compassion. So it's not high requirement. It's crazy how, I guess, some people I've talked to, they talk about it like it's a Herculean task to have some compassion. Another reason that motorcyclists are just generally less toxic is just lack of ego. So less toxicity is usually tied to having less of an ego. Other than the two extremes, one being sport bike bro spec sheet nerds and the other being super duper boomer Harley owners who layer down on grass clippings, there isn't really a lot of toxicity in the bike community. Like, between naked bike owners, cruiser owners, standards, dirt bikes, sumos, ADVs, like a lot of the bikes in the middle, they don't really breathe down each other's neck, right? It's like I said, it's the super duper touring bikes, the 1,000-pound Harley owners, and then the super duper fast sport bike bros. Like, those are really the only two far extremes. And even then, by the way, there's still a lot of good Harley owners and a lot of cool sport bikers. So like, it's still only a small subsection of those two extremes that are toxic. And the funnier thing is that really only exists online. If you've ever seen actual real life interactions, even just through video on YouTube, like if a sport biker crashes, you already know that a Harley guy will still stop to help him up. Same thing vice versa. If Harley owners ever get in a bad situation, sport bikers will stop to check up on them. It's usually only spec sheet nerd car guys who are cosplaying as bike guys, and they pretend that they can gap everyone in those communities because they secretly own a super duper modded R1M or Turbo Busa, but in reality they just drive their grandma's Buick and they're just role-playing off of being a rider to fill the void in their heart. Like, this is like such a meme that like every biker knows it, but somehow car guys still fall into this archetype, and I don't think they realize how obvious they look. Whenever you start going full toxic spec sheet nerd, that is practically a massive siren that screams, I've never actually ridden a bike, I've never actually ridden a bike, I've never actually ridden a bike, because every leader bike owner ever, as well as even boosted leader bike owners, aren't nearly as toxic as car guys who are masquerading as bike guys, because a lot of bike guys don't have to talk like that because they already know what they have. Now, of course, when it comes to talking about how fast bikes are compared to cars, yeah, bikers, yeah, we'll do that. we don't make fun of each other much, but we love ragging about how fast our bikes are compared to cars. So you got me there. We're a little toxic there, but that's a little bit like, but that's different, right? That's community v community PvP, right? That's like external faction player versus player. When it comes to internal PvP, motorcyclists, we don't really make fun of each other nearly as much as car guys do. Car guys, if you become a car guy, you are now in an open world, actively enabled PvP zone 24/7. You will catch strays from every car guy. Like, every car guy is toxic to each other. It's just like a rule of being a car guy. With motorcyclists, we don't have that level of internal PvP. Like, we're not nearly as toxic to each other. We will still be, you know, a little playful when it comes to how we talk to car guys or other people in other communities. And this extends into toxicity even regarding cosmetic mods. We're just not as serious. We're goofy. A lot of people have this hardcore tattooed up shaved head image of all bikers, but in reality, that's just Dennis cosplaying as Harley gangsters 50 years past their prime. Most riders are pretty silly when it comes to how we look, behave, and modify our bikes. Car guys have been arguing about underglow being rice for 3 decades now. Meanwhile, bikers just slap it on and no one bats an eye. And that's true for almost every single cosmetic mod, by the way. Silly stickers, wacky paint jobs, boatloads of chrome, lots of lights. Hell, even anime wraps started on motorcycles first. They were referred to as itansha. So like there are certain like things that the cruiser community and sport bike bros still might find a bit distasteful, but even then they're still not that mean about it, because like I still think raked out chopper forks look cool. I still think certain stretch swing arms can look cool. I do think it's weird when it gets like more than a foot longer, but again, I can't tell you how to live your life. If you want to get a Busa and put a 2-foot swing arm on it extension, there's not really much I can do, right? I can't fly on a plane and tell you not to do it, and it's kind of like a well accepted thing that we just don't really have the time, or we don't, I don't think we care to tell each other. But with car guys, it still blows my mind that even in my most recent short, where I thought it was a super innocent topic, window tint, where one of the most annoying toxic comments I got were people like, what are you so afraid of? Why do you need window tint? Why are you so defensive about it? Only ugly people who don't want to be seen want window tint. Like, dog, it's not that deep. The sun is bright. Some of us have medical problems. You are not the main character of life's story. Everyone has their own story, and there are a lot of people who are sensitive to bright light. And my transition lenses unfortunately do not function inside of a car that well, so I have to have darker tint instead. Also, for a lot of other people who get tinted cars, even aside from medical issues, some of them just may not be a fan of the fishbowl look. Some of them may just like tinted windows because it reminds them of Hot Wheels or video game cars. Again, it's not that deep. But that's me proving a point of how an argument in the car community can spawn over anything. I've made a whole career on this channel disproving some of these dumb arguments using actual facts, and I still get people whining about how dumb the rest of us are for doing these mods despite the evidence. Don't even get me started on the whole front wheel drive wing argument. That one still rustles a lot of people's feathers, and I made a whole short about that got a ton of views because people still look, despite being in the motorcycle community longer than the car community, I actually can't even count on one of my hands how many times these arguments have occurred over the years. Such trivial things like tint, wheels, lighting, aerodynamics, and so on. You do any of the equivalent of that on a motorcycle, no one even cares, right? No one cares enough to be an asshole to argue over it. But anyone posts any mod on their car, you got all these savants coming out, you know, these holier than thou savants who nitpick your decision and talk about the tiniest of changes like there's some super duper heavily studied rocket scientist who knows the cutting edge, bleeding edge of aerodynamics. It's just like, look, we were talking about window tint. Actual clown behavior. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. If you enjoy automotive content, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like this video, and share it with your fellow car guys or bike guys to compare whether or not you experience more toxicity or less toxicity in your communities. Other than that though, see y'all next time. Blade Angel out.